1707 was the act of union between England and Scotland, forging the United Kingdom we have to this very day, okay? It was at that moment that this castle changed hands, yeah? And it was also a moment of strategic change in the island of Britain itself. Edinburgh Castle, only a couple more times would face any serious military attack, yeah? And after that it would become a very peaceful, shall we say, established castle that we have to this very day, yeah? That area was called the Lower Wall, and it was like that for 2 centuries, yeah? The modern gatehouse, built in the 19th century, the Victorian one we talked about earlier on, there would have always been one in its place, yeah, centuries ago. The inner gatehouse today, the Portcullis Gate, built in 1574, there would have been a series of gates there too. Yeah, the inner barrier you walk through as well, there would have been something similar to that as well, yeah? So imagine, you're the enemy infantry. Your job is to break into Edinburgh Castle. You maybe get through that first gate with a battering ram. You run through with your men and you're greeted to a hail of arrow fire on your position. Yeah? Then crossbow bolts in later generations and musket and rifle fire after that. Yeah? Then you're making your way up, you're trying to pound your way through the inner barrier and you're getting hit by archer fire in the side, in the flank, right? Those of you that survive, maybe finally get to the Portcullis Gate. And those of you still banging on the door now, being hit in the back with arrows or, fire, yeah? So maybe you'll get through those first 2 gates, and then maybe you'll get to the Portcullis Gate in particular, yeah? Guys, we're gonna move over because I want to give the opportunity for the guys to clean the bins. Yeah, guys, come on over here. And then maybe, just maybe, you get to the Portcullis itself. The Portcullis is literally built into the gatehouse. You've got to break the gatehouse before the actual gate itself snaps. So, above the position where the gate comes down, there's a hole. The defenders will take the opportunity to pour boiling oil on top of the attackers. And my favorite and most insidious method of defense, the big black cauldron filled with sand. You cook the sand on the fire till it's red hot, and then you pour it over the enemy. Yeah? Goes all through the increments in either plate armor or chainmail armor, cooks a man alive like a lobster. It is unpleasant, but you'll think twice before hitting that gatehouse again, right? The gatehouse guys kept the English out of Edinburgh Castle for 150 years, and now they just charge them to come inside. Much better, right? Very much few people have died, yeah? I don't know how many 6s you'll require to roll on that to get through that gatehouse, right? We have a game on this, so I'm just going to play with that a little bit, yeah? But as we look over, just turn for a moment and look. Look at that absolutely breathtaking estuary. That's called the Firth of Forth. It runs in from the North Sea all the way to the centre of Scotland, where you'll find the town of Stirling. Anybody going to Stirling? Well, quite a few, right? You're going to see a very similar castle in the position of Stirling Town. It too is built on top of a dead volcano. Edinburgh Castle and Stirling Castle are twins, they're sisters, right? So Edinburgh Castle, the town of Edinburgh and the Leith Harbour are a string of pearls. Stirling Castle is the diamond of Scotland. To get the diamond, you need the pearls, yeah? Basically what I mean by that is Stirling Castle is Scotland's strongest and hardest point. But if you lose it, you lose everything. Because it's the road to the Scottish Highlands, up to Callander, up to Fort William. If you defend it, you successfully defend the realm. To get there by boat, you've got to run the gauntlet of the Leith Harbour, defended by the town, defended by the castle. Yeah? Now do you understand why Edinburgh Castle is the most besieged fortress in Britain? 26 sieges, because everybody wants to come up that waterway and hit Stirling. Yeah? So, get the picture. The land that lies beyond, that is called the Kingdom of Fife. It's not an independent realm outside of Scotland, yeah? The Kingdom of Fife, guys, is often called that because the Romans referred to it centuries ago as Pictland, land of the Picti, the painted ones, yeah? With agriculture, yeah? The Roman general brought the 9th Legion of Rome here to Scotland, to ancient Caledonia centuries ago. This is what he wanted, the Highlands of Scotland. He wanted all the land for the Roman Empire. So they went up. And up they went past the lovely Votadini, who traded with them, and they tried to give them advice. They said, look, we live here for a reason. Don't go up there, they're insane. Absolutely mad, right? They didn't listen to them, probably because they couldn't understand. All they hear was shash, 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 shash. No, go get away, spit in my ear, right? Go away. So, up they went, armed to the teeth. The Romans quickly found a force worthy of their might. numbering over 30,000. The army of the Picts turned up into battle. Now these were a ferocious bunch. Averaging in height the size of that mailbox over there, right? They were tiny, but their hair spiked up using the sap and the wax of the trees, yeah? Sword and shield, spear or bow strapped to their back. They were completely naked, yeah? Not a stitch of clothing or armor, painted blue from head to toe. They were shaking more than their swords at the Romans, ladies and gentlemen, right? The blue paint was a thing called woad. It was like a mixture, leaves and rubes and herbs that grew naturally here in Scotland. So imagine this from the perspective of the Romans. Yeah, you're the 9th Legion. You're here in Scotland in December. Yeah, it's -10 wind. There's snow on the ground. You're wearing sandals, and you're now surrounded by an army of very angry smurfs. What do you do next? You withdraw, you build a bloody big wall, and you keep them out, right? Not the first empire in history to build a wall to keep others out. Didn't work. Yeah, the Picts raided numerous times over Hadrian's Wall. But what Hadrian's Wall did do was divide the boundary of Britannia and Caledonia. Ancient Britannia, modern day England and Wales, and Caledonia, modern day Scotland. Scotland's ancient name bears a badge of pride because they were never truly conquered by the Romans, yeah? This land would remain highlands for centuries until today it would become part of the Scottish lowlands. The people here are very similar to the very people that live in Edinburgh and the surrounding regions, yeah? Although I must say, you ever seen The Lion King? See the scene with Simba speaking of Mufasa, and Mufasa says to Simba, "All the light the land touches is yours, Simba," right? Except that dark land over there. You must never go there, Simba, yeah? That's Fife. Don't go to Fife, right? Fife is like the armpit of Scotland, right? I'm joking, right? It's actually a series of charming fishing villages, and on the other side of Fife you've got St Andrews. Yeah, some of you may go to St Andrews, the home of golf. Yeah, it's like Graceland for golfers. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. Every July, from August, July and August, all the Australians, Americans and Canadians who play golf invade Scotland just to go to St Andrews, right? We let them occupy the area as well because the amount of money they spend is absolutely fantastic, right? They come on my tour already dressed as golfers. They're already enthusiastic. We come to the castle and we go in directly there in the afternoon, right? Either way, guys, the Kingdom of Fife was something quite separate, something quite different, right? And after I've explained all of that to you, please do not ask me, is that France? Right? Because I will take this umbrella, bring up your jacks, you open it, and you'll fly over the castle wall, right? I get people from London asking me this question, which is all the more worrying. North, south, yeah? London's down that way and France is beyond it, right? People see an estuary and they assume it's a channel, which is really, really worrying in terms of modern education purposes. There we go, right? So, yeah, it's a long way, right? Coming back to the castle itself, guys, the battery of cannons we have on the north here, this is called the Argyll Battery, named after the 2nd Duke of Argyll, commanded the British Armed Forces here in Edinburgh in one of the biggest battles in Britain, the Battle of Sheriff Moor. You could see it actually from this particular parameter, hence why they called it the Argyll Battery, yeah? The Battle of Sheriff Moor was a face-off against the British Redcoat soldiers and the Jacobite forces, yeah? The Jacobite rebellion of 1715, led by James Stewart, the Old Pretender, yeah? Now, for those of you wondering what the devil I'm talking about, right, some of you have been watching Outlander. Where are my Outlander fans? There we go. The Housewives, that's right, yeah? I know what happens, right? That streaming service goes on at 10 p.m. at night. She looks at the husband, she smiles, he goes over to the wardrobe, unwillingly puts the kilt on, right? 2 hours of role play later, right? The streaming service gets turned off and she wakes up at 2 a.m. in the morning screaming, Jamie, oh Jamie, right? I have met Jamie in real life, by the way, guys. Sam, the actor, very nice guy. He was even kind enough to sign a little autograph of a magazine article I had with me at the time. I gave it to my wife as a Christmas present, and then she framed it and put it above the bed. So, we now have a 1-year-old child of our own, right? You do the math. So, those of you who've been watching Outlander, you've been watching, shall we say, the final Jacobite rebellion of 1745 portrayed on screen, led by the very charismatic Bonnie Prince Charlie, yeah? It actually goes back to his grandfather, James VII of Scotland and 2nd of England, yeah? There were a lot more Jameses in Scotland than there were in England, hence the different titles, right? So, what was the deal with James? James was a Roman Catholic. And that was a problem for the English, who were Anglican, and problem for the Scots, who were Presbyterian. So they booted him off the throne. They invited his Dutch relatives, William and Mary, to take his position. Why? They were Protestants. It was just far more comfortable to have them on the throne. No more threat. So James is livid. He raises an army to try and retake his realms. Yeah? Some support he gets from the Scottish Highlands in the form of the Highlanders, who remain Roman Catholics. Yeah? Over in Ireland, he gets his biggest base of support, the Irish themselves. Yeah? They march to a massive battle in 1690 called the Battle of the Boyne, where he's crushed. James's forces are extinguished. Yeah? He lives the rest of his life in exile in France, not there. Yeah? From this base, he would build more support, right? Through his entire life, claiming to be the king of Great Britain and Ireland. Realistically, he'd become little more than a pretender. His son James was called the Old Pretender because of this reason. He followed in the footsteps of his father, and he never even sat on the throne. But Bonnie Prince Charlie was the young pretender, the dashing man who was restore his grandfather, and of course his father, who was alive at the time, to the throne proper. All of them failed. And in 1745, they're just wasps. Don't worry, they'll chase you around the castle if you're not careful, yeah? The fact is, what would happen, yeah? The last rebellion, who's here is going to Inverness, anybody? You're going to go to the Battle of Culloden Field? Yeah, there you'll find massive mounds of flowers on Clan Fraser and Clan Mackenzie and nobody else, right? You all know why, because you all do it, yeah? What happens? Well, the Battle of Culloden was a dramatic failure. Yeah, all of the supporters of Bonnie's Prince Charlie would either die on the battlefield or would be hung not long after. Yeah? The Highlanders themselves would pay the ultimate price. Their weapons were confiscated: rifles, muskets, guns, swords, shields. Yeah? Even the cannons in their castles were taken away. Their castles themselves were slighted to be indefensible. So Scotland, a military society for centuries, was now turned into a civilian society for the first time in its long, long history. Yeah? So much so, the cannons we have on the north face of Edinburgh Castle today are not from that time. They're installed later, in the mid-19th century. They are the wrong type of cannon for a castle. There's a clue on the bottom. What is it? Wheels. Wheels, thank you, sir, right? If you shot these damn things, they're coming straight towards us, right? They are ship cannon. They belong on galleons to fire at other galleons. They've been placed there because one woman thought they looked rather fetching on the side of the castle walls. Victoria. Put them over there! Right here, boys, put them over there, right? Realistically, Victoria was far more Germanic. Put them over there, right? You can get a picture. They're wrong. They're just wrong. But Stirling Castle also has a lovely set of them as well, but they would have never even got to the channel, let alone anywhere else, right? But that beast in the corner, guys, that's a real gun. That is the L118 light howitzer gun. Yep, that is Edinburgh Castle. 1 o'clock, it flies every single day at 1 o'clock to tell the sailors on the first floor what time it is. Now, originally, we had a different method of doing this here in Edinburgh. If you look in the distance over there, you can see a tower. Everybody see it with a white cross? Yep. The cross is not a Christian cross, it's actually an elevation stick. It brings up the ball on the top of the tower, and it goes to the top, and then the sailors, they look through their little eyepiece, they see the ball up the top. Wonderful, 1 o'clock, change the gentleman's pocket watch. Well, the sailors had something called a chronometer. A chronometer is an ancient seafaring navigation device. Seafaring navigation requires very accurate time telling, hence why they wanted to know the time from the harbour, right? Either way, the problem is, theoretically they can see it. Practically, this is Scotland. Do you always think it looks as clear as that? No, there's a thick body of fog that emanates from the harbour all the way to Edinburgh Castle called the Harbour. We could literally not even see the cannon in December, let alone the harbour. So, with the idea of installing a gun inside the castle just made more sense. Bang, 1 o'clock. Everybody can hear that for miles around. So they change to 1 o'clock, right? However, we have 2 more of these guns in storage, yeah? All of them are L118 light artillery howitzers, and they fire a 21 gun salute on very special occasions, such as the Queen's birthday, or the Queen's official birthday, or any other royal reason she can think of, right? Now, why 21 shots? Well, America, we copied you. 21 gun salute, 1776, you roll the numbers together, you get 21, right? We are not the only country to piggyback off your tradition, okay? There are others. However, during the Platinum Jubilee, we fired a 42 gun salute.
Yeah.
Because 21 times 2, 42. That's how petty the British can be, guys, right? Needless to say, we cannot fire a shot for every year she's been on the throne, otherwise we'll never leave this sodding castle, right? Go down to the 1 o'clock gun display to learn all the more about the different guns we've had. On the left over here, you have the Jacobite rooms and the Redcoat Cafe. These are Edinburgh Castle's tea rooms. No British castle would be complete without tea rooms, right? And if the Americans on the tour will kindly refrain from throwing our tea over the side of the castle wall, that'd be greatly appreciated, right? You don't see the Canadians doing it, yeah? Either way, guys, if you want refreshments in the form of tea, coffee, juice, water, or even ice cream, yes, they sell ice cream inside, right? I know it's astonishing in Scotland, but there we go, right? The original purpose of the buildings, they were horse and cart sheds, supplying the garrison inside and outside of the castle. Even the middle of the road is elevated to allow horses with metal shoes get better grip around the steeper aspects of the castle all the way back in the 17th century, right? But now, what we'll do, we'll head down to the Western Panorama for a breathtaking view of Edinburgh and a different section of the castle. Come this way. Everybody here, all your family members, you promise you didn't waste them? Yeah? Right, there you go, Granny. Alright, so, the son or the daughter, if they want to try and inherit and you don't want them to inherit, that's what you do, alright? British medieval history is very much similar to Game of Thrones, ladies and gentlemen. Those little boys in the tower, they were real people. Just to let you know, which is the third era of history, yeah? However, do you have any questions before I continue this tour? Anything you would like to know at all about Edinburgh, Castle, Scotland, Europe in general, if you're from wider afield? Do you want to know anything? Anything at all? I am your singing, dancing monkey for the next hour.
Who's on the throne when Bonnie Prince Charlie was fighting?
When Bonnie Prince Charlie was fighting on the throne, you'd have had the Hanoverian dynasty, so the 4 Georges, George I, George II, George III, George IV. Now, the Hanoverians, George I didn't actually speak a word of English, all in German, right, which was rather problematic, I should imagine, at the court, but it was the Hanoverian dynasty. So basically, the last Stuart was, Queen Anne. She died in about the early 1700s after having 20 miscarriages. Rather an unfortunate woman, if I'm honest. She died morbidly obese and alone. Yeah, there's actually a building named after her on the Royal Mile inside Edinburgh Castle that are the second tea rooms of Edinburgh Castle. A little bit more of a delightful place than her own court may have been. The Hanoverian dynasty was on the throne at the time. You know? By the museum, it'll take you a good hour and a half to get around. It is not small, but if you like guns, knives, suits of armor, killing things in general, you will love this museum, right? If you get a monthly subscription to Guns and Ammo, this is your museum, right? Usually it's at this point the Texans walk directly off the tour and go straight inside, yeah? With cameras photographing guns that they already own. I got that one, that one, that one, that one. Or if we need that one, we'll order it online, Walmart. Right, the equivalent of our Tesco. I find it really strange, guys. I'm sorry. From a country that doesn't have, guns is a general accessible thing that you can put here or here. Quite odd for us to go into a supermarket and say, "I'll have that rifle, that machine." This is quite odd, right? But nonetheless, I understand your country, your rules. I get it. Yeah. So, the centre of the courtyard here is this man, Field Marshal Douglas Haig, hated by Canadians and Australians alike. The Brits have got rather dim views of him as well. The reason why he has a statue, we'll come into him in a moment. World War I, a series of operations were launched on the front in 1916 called the Battle of the Somme. This was the commander-in-chief of that battle. Tens of thousands of young men would lose their lives in the opening salvos of that conflict. By the end, several days of the Somme was fought over, millions were. This is the man that masterminded that. Yeah, hence why they call him the Butcher of the Somme. Yeah?
With a football?
With the football, I think that was a little bit early. That was the Christmas of 1914. The British commanders made sure that never happened again. They made sure they told the officers, you do not allow British troops to play football with their German counterparts. Yeah? They stripped away their humanity, very much so, just making men machines to kill each other. 1914 was the last of their humanity in many
I thought they kicked the football and who got it back.
Yeah, they did play football, and you're talking about Warhorse, yeah. the famous. Well, this is not quite that, no. The Somme, guys, was an absolutely gritty battle. Yeah. However, At the end of the war, this man opened a factory outside the city of Edinburgh where young men suffering from PTSD, often, veterans, would work for a living making little paper poppies. These paper poppies were then sold to the general public outside. Any money raised from that would come back to the Veterans Fund. This is the man who founds the British poppy appeal. Does it change the fact he's the butcher of the South? I don't know. You have to make that judgment for yourself, right? Either way, if you want to learn more about the man, there's a little blue sign just over here. You can scan and learn a lot more about his life, right? As told by his grandson. Completely objective, of course, right? But either way, he's an interesting character. The statue itself used to be at the front of Edinburgh Castle in the middle of the Esplanade. It was moved in the year 2011 and placed here because they changed the style of the stadium. It was no longer easy for troops to march in the middle of this little Esplanade with him stuck in the center, right? Either way, guys, if you want to learn more about his world, his life, go inside the museum and discover a little bit more about the military history of Scotland itself. Guys, come in a little bit, okay, because the other group is kind of flanking you, yeah? After everything I've just explained, do not ask me, is that Stalin? It's not Stalin, it just happens to have a very similar mustache to Joseph Stalin, right? I have Russians on my tour that come down this little hill, they take one look at that statue and they just turn around. They're like, no, never again, no. There are military buildings dotted around Edinburgh Castle, right? First and foremost, it's important to understand that this is a British military HQ, yeah? The building behind you over here is the Governor's House. It is the house of the Governor of Edinburgh Castle. The one building you will not be allowed to go inside on your tour of Edinburgh Castle. Yeah? Solar center of the room. Many galleries, displays and museums will allow you inside. You purchased your tickets, you can now enter and access them and see the displays that interest you the most. This one you cannot, because it's the Governor's house where he lives, right, where he works. Yeah? You'll see on the front there's two plaques: private residence, officers' mess. Governor's house dates back to 1742 and is generally where the officers spent their off time when they come, finish duty. They come off after a busy week of ordering other people around. They sit down, they drink gin, play cards, shoot pool instead of people, and they relax. The building itself, I've never seen the interior of it because I'm Scum, I'm not an officer, right? So there's two little signs over there, two little blue signs. You can scan them and get an interior gallery of what the building actually looks like on the inside, right? However, for us, it'll always remain an exterior. Beautiful Georgian architecture built in the 18th century during the Hanoverian dynasty, with Our Lady was asked me earlier on. At the time, this is a typical example of building architecture. It looks like something you could find outside of London somewhere, right? Very much so, yeah. However, the governor was a real position and still is, Back in the day, it was a military position. This governor, installed in 1742, in the Battle of 1745 for Edinburgh Castle, when the Jacobites attacked the castle, he ordered all the cannons to be arraigned upon the town and fire into the town to drive the Jacobites down the Royal Mile. Not just Jacobites, but ordinary civilians were killed that day. There's still a cannonball lodged in the top house of the Royal Mile called Cannonball House, right? Scots have a very simple and straightforward way about it, right? Argyle Battery, Argyle Tower, Cannonball House, Governor's House. It's all very simple, right? Doesn't make my job all that more difficult. But the governor today, guys, is a ceremonial position. He comes out of the castle with his lovely black hat, his ostrich feathers, and you'll shake your hand, you'll say hello, he'll do all the signing ceremonies and all the official celebrations, right? And basically, guys, it's to make money. You expect to see this, right? When you come to Britain, what do you expect to see? All the tourist destinations, soldiers, pomp and ceremony. Do you think we like standing around in big red fuzzy jackets with giant black hats? We love it. We love it, right? Part and parcel of who we are, right? It's part of the pomp and ceremony of what British means, right? Either way, you can't go inside this building, I'm sorry to tell you, right? The one on the left you can. This absolutely horrific monstrosity of a building. Over here on the left-hand side is the new barracks, built in 1799. I'm not the first person to describe it that way. Sir Walter Scott commonly referred to the building as, and I quote, the vulgar cotton mill of Edinburgh Castle. Yeah? I think he had a point. The building is enormous. It can hold up to 600 soldiers inside at any one time. Why do you need 600 soldiers to guard this castle? It needs no more than 300 at most. Yeah? Just in case. 1799, it's a very important year, 10 years after the French Revolution, when one man was leading armies across Europe, crushing all resistance before him, Napoleon Bonaparte. They expected Boney and his men to land at that harbour, yeah, and bring his men on shore and take the Scottish capital, or any other major city along the coast, right? Never happened. Because we won the Battle of Trafalgar. Otherwise, I'd be speaking to you in French today. A lovely language, but history would be written very, very different, right? Either way, ladies and gents, if you like Napoleonic history, you will appreciate the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards Regimental Museum. Inside is an amazing Imperial Eagle taken from the Battle of Waterloo itself. An Imperial Eagle was an item that Napoleon would give to his elite French soldiers to take into battle. That item has been touched by Napoleon himself. Yeah, for me, this is like gold dust. I'm going to break this umbrella with excitement. And some of you are like, meh. Yeah, Napoleon Bonaparte, guys, is one of the most important characters in human history, right? And everybody complains that he was short. Everybody was short back then, right? We're all small, right? So, go and have a little look. Opposite, just over in the corner, is the Royal Scots Regiment Museum. Yeah, they're the oldest regiment in the British Army. Lots of stuff to see inside in the forms of military uniforms and badges and medals, right? If you like this sort of stuff, you'll love the museums. If you don't, stay the hell away from them, right? You'll be bored to tears in minutes otherwise, right? What I would recommend instead, just around the corner over there, is the Prisoner of War Museum, especially for you Americans. Yeah? Inside this castle, during the American Revolutionary War, prisoners of war from the Revolutionary War were kept. Yep. But the sad thing was, guys, I'm sorry to tell you this, the Americans were treated appallingly. They were not seen as enemy combatants, nor were they seen as POWs. In the context of the first British Empire, they were seen as turncoats, traitors, and rebels. And they were treated as such. Yep. They were given the worst food, the worst clothing, the worst blankets, and they were treated with contempt in some of the worst conditions you can imagine. But the Americans were survivors, yeah? Often making out of pieces of lumber, their firewood, yeah? They'd have little knives and they would carve into the wood little jewelry boxes and children's toys. They would sell these items to the British public that came inside the castle each and every Sunday through the gates of Deary's Battery. With the money they made, they survived. They bought clothes, they bought blankets, and they carried on. When they finally left Edinburgh Castle, when the UK and the US finally signed their peace treaty, yeah, one plucky American went over to the door of the prison, yeah, and carved into the door something so his British captors would always remember them. He carved into the door the American flag, the stars and stripes, which in fairness is a very American thing to do, yeah? America, yeah! And jumps over the side of the castle walls, firing guns on the way down, and the castle explodes in the background, right? That's the Bruce Willis version of events, right? Realistically, they got on a boat and they sailed back to America, right? But the French lived with them. French were treated as POWs and prisoners of war. But the French guys learned from their American colleagues how to craft into wooden items, yeah? But they weren't making jewelry boxes or children's toys. What the French were up to was far more sophisticated. Do you ever play chess? Have you ever seen a chessboard with little, chess pieces? Imagine something that big, yeah, with little stamps, insignia, or signage on the bottom. All of it backwards. They would then bribe the guards with the allowance they were given as legitimate POWs to bring them paper and ink. It's a very specific type of paper and ink. They were bribing them so they would take it when technically they shouldn't have been having their hands on it at all. What do you think these Frenchmen were up to?
Counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting, thank you very much. On point immediately. They were forging British currency inside Edinburgh Castle, right? And the French were so goddamn good at it. The only thing that they were getting wrong was the serial numbers, because of course they're issued by the banks themselves in a book, Well, of course, the British public would buy these notes for half the price, spend them in the town, they would enter circulation. Nobody could tell the difference, right, until they got to the bank and some poor bugger tried to cash it. Yeah, the banks got to such an extent that there were so many, yeah, circling around the town, they were literally devaluing the currency. So they started to buy them back from the public just to take them out of circulation, right? Everyone's a winner except the bank. You don't see me crying, right, guys? Justice must be served somehow, yeah? Either way, some of the last prisoners were kept inside Edinburgh Castle in the year 1814. Why? The buggers kept escaping all the time, right? Edinburgh Castle by that time had become a rotten scoundrel of a building, yeah? Parts of it were falling apart, yeah? Some of the soldiers were literally carving holes in the side of the prisons, you know, literally tying the laundry together and climbing out of the castle. One escape attempt involved 47 prisoners who scaled over the wall in the middle of the night. Yeah, they left one guy behind. I don't know what he'd done. Clearly annoyed somebody. Can you imagine the only person to wake up in the morning and be like, oh crap, they've all gone, right? My personal favourite story is about one Frenchman who attempted to escape Edinburgh Castle by hiding in the dung cart. Yeah, inside the manure cart, expecting them just to leave him outside. Some farmer would come along, buy the dung, and, you know, fertilise his fields with it. No, the Scottish soldiers literally emptied the dung cart over the side of the castle walls, and he fell to his death, right? Rather unfortunately, yeah, the dung came in after him. In Prague, in the Czech Republic, they call that defenestration. So it goes out of a window, right? And you're usually a bishop. But nonetheless, they stopped keeping people in here after that, guys. The last political prisoner kept inside Edinburgh Castle was a man called David Kirkwood. David Kirkwood was actually a trade unionist from the city of Glasgow in the time of the interwar period after the Bolshevik Revolution. Yeah, the British thought he was some sort of Bolshevik, so they arrested him here. He wasn't a Bolshevik; he was just a trade unionist. Yeah, he ended his career in the House of Lords, so it's not a bad career progression from going, you know, POW of your political conscience to His Majesty's government. Right? It's pretty decent, in fact. Yeah. However, what we're going to do now, we're going to go through the last layer of defence, the last gate of Edinburgh Castle, Fugue's Gate, the Foggy Gate. It's called that because the thick fog comes from this beautiful harbour over here. It reaches the castle and it stops at the gate. Why? The wind tends to blow the fog off the top of the castle. So when you stand at the castle gates at Fugue's Battery, all the way back from the 17th century, you look back down at Edinburgh Castle, she looks like an island in the sky, like something from Studio Ghibli. It looks incredible, but you're going to come back in December to see it. Any takers? No, I didn't think so. This is a joke I use like every tour that he happens to be nearby, right? He makes the joke on the tour as well, right? Just that, you know, guys, come a little bit more over here. Well, I'm bringing you here because otherwise you're just looking at the wall. I want you to see this, yeah? Edinburgh Castle, from this particular layer, guys, you're in. If your mission is to take this castle, you've taken it, right? That was the last gate of defence, Fugue's Gate, the Foggy Gate built in the 17th century under Charles II, right? Anything beyond that is a cakewalk. Yes, you could argue, you could put up a, you know, a barricade here, but realistically that building wouldn't have been there to give you the barricade back then anyway, yeah? This structure just behind me over here, many people regard as this beautiful old Gothic medieval structure. It's not. It's built in 1929. It is one of the youngest structures inside Edinburgh Castle, if not the youngest. Yep. This is the Scottish National War Memorial, built by the architect Sir Robert Lorimer in 1929. Now, very important point, when you go inside, please be respectful of the structure, okay? Don't eat food, don't take ridiculous selfies or flash photography, drink alcohol or coffee, okay? This is a memorial to all the dead soldiers of World War I, World War II, and every conflict after, yeah? Furthermore, please do not jauntily gallant on top of the, you know, war memorial garden. People do, yeah? And I've seen soldiers very tempted to, right? We fire with semi-automatic rounds in the British Army, guys, so we're more accurate. Rather than just spraying the position, we make sure we kill our man, right? However, unfortunately, they only write it in English, which I find kind of counterproductive, because if somebody doesn't understand English, they're going to march on there anyway, right? I find it highly ironic that the youngest building in Edinburgh Castle happens to overlook the oldest one. That building over there, guys, is St. Margaret's Chapel. built way back in the 1100s. It is one of the last buildings of Edinburgh Castle in its original form. Yeah, it's also a wonderful representation of what Celtic Christianity once looked like in all of Scotland. Large, but way before these enormous Norman cathedrals and churches were ever constructed. This is what Christianity looked like in the British Isles, including Ireland as well. All right, it's an important part of our fabric and our past. There's 3 windows. One for St. Margaret, one for St. Columba, and one for St. Andrew. Yep, all 3 very important saints in the history of Scotland. Ignore the window to William Wallace. I have no idea why they added that one. It makes no sense whatsoever, right? However, all of Edinburgh Castle was burnt in the year 1314 by this structure. Who was St. Margaret? She was the wife of Malcolm Canmore, the man who killed Macbeth to take his crown. Yeah, the son, David I, was the man who made Edinburgh the capital. He was the man who founded Holyrood Palace. The importance of this structure, religious, politically, socially, culturally, is enormous. So that's why they didn't burn it. But the question is, who didn't burn it? Not the English, but the Scots themselves. Yeah, Edinburgh Castle was razed to the ground by the very people supposedly defending it. Well, they weren't at the time. Yeah. What was going on? The Wars of Independence. Yeah. You see, the King of Scotland, Alexander III, had died. No child came after him. So the bishops of Scotland, in their desperation, attempted to find a new king. They called together a parliament, hundreds of nobles, and said, who amongst you has the right to be the next Scottish king? And 12 men put their hands up. They're like, oh crap, here we go. Yeah? They brought them in a committee room and said, guys, you can't all be king. Who put out the documents? Who's got the right claim? They looked through them all, and they decided there were 2. John Balliol, who nobody liked, and Robert de Burgh, who nobody trusted. Fantastic, right? In their desperation to avoid a civil war, the bishops of Scotland invited one man to come in and arbitrate. This man's name? Edward Longshanks, the King of England. Literally the last man you should have on speed dial for anything, right? Edward was a menace to these islands at the time. He conquered all of Wales, most of Ireland, half of France, and he was now going to take Scotland too, right? But his method of conquering Scotland, you've got to give the man credit, was genius. In order to pick the next Scottish king, his conditions were 3. Number 1, the castles are mine. Yeah, I will occupy the castles and keep the peace. The Scottish army, number 2, will drop their weapons, put them into storage and stand down. Number 3, all the nobles will sign a document guaranteeing their good behaviour, otherwise their land will be stripped from them by me. 3 conditions that allow him to conquer Scotland with no opposition. Not even a speck of blood is spilled, but he takes the country. Yeah, he picks the next king, John Balliol. Balliol is expected to dance a pretty dance. He does not. Yeah, he rebels quite quickly. He ends up in the Tower of London and dead. So Edward takes direct control of Scotland. In Wales, he's known as the Conqueror of Wales. In Scotland, he's known as the Hammer because of his brutal treatment of the Scottish population. It doesn't take long for them to rise up in rebellion. Yeah, they're led by a man by the name of William Wallace. Wallace, guys, is a 6'7" member of the petty nobility. He's enormous. Not far, probably maybe a little bit taller than you, sir, right? Or 6'7", right? The average height of a Scotsman at the time is around 5'4", which I think ends at your belly. Everybody here, right? They're like, oh, wow, come on, William, let's go and fight them, right? He tells them, take your plows, take your scythes, melt them down. Make long pikes, yeah? Twice the length of a man, maybe even 3 times, to hold the English at bay. Keep their cavalry over there, yeah, beyond arm's length, and we'll fight in little porcupines, yeah, and they're called sheltrons, and they work to great effect. Only if the enemy doesn't have longbowmen. This was the problem, yeah? At the Battle of Stirling Bridge, the Scots cleverly made a massive gap between them and the English army that was the Firth of Forth, that body of water, but obviously a lot narrower up to Stirling. So, one side of the bridge of the Scots and their little sheltrons, literally bottlenecking the bridge, and the English cavalry attempts to ride over. They keep dying on the spears, as you can well imagine. Halfway through, they panic. They attempt to send the English infantry to deal with the spears, and the weight of the bridge collapse. Yeah? The English army is swept away in the Firth of Forth, and great victory is achieved. However, the following year, Edward invades with an enormous army. He crushes the Scots at the Battle of Falkirk the following year. Yeah? William Wallace goes to the hills, fights a guerrilla warfare campaign, but is betrayed within 7 years, and he ends up in London, yeah, under the capture of Edward, his shall we say, final judgment is to be hung, drawn and quartered. One of the most agonizing ways to die you can imagine, yeah? It is worse than death in many respects. You take a man and you hang him till he's nearly dead. Then you cut him down. Yeah, you tie his arms and his legs to 4 horses, the horses pull, and of course the arms and legs come out of the sockets. Then you drown him until he can't take any more. Yeah. Then we take a knife, we cut it down the body, we pull out the intestines and we burn it on a big pot of boiling oil whilst the victim's still alive. Then we cut off each and every limb one by one, including the particulars. We all know what the particulars are, right? Yeah. And we cut off the head at the end. The most skilled and gifted executioner will have the victim alive before they take off the head. Wallace was alive before they took off his head, yeah? So that one scene you see him going, freedom! It was more like, freedom! Yeah, you get the picture, yeah? Not so nice. His head ended up on London Bridge. His body parts were strewn throughout the UK to tell all of the British Isles who's king. Edward's king, you know? However, the Scots felt differently, yeah? Another rebellion was raised, this time led by Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. Robert the Bruce murdered his rival, a man called John Comyn, in a small monastery. The Roman Catholic Church excommunicated him as a result. Yeah? As a result of that, he was strewn around Scotland, burning towns in the Highlands to try and deny the English occupiers a way to extract resources and the population of Scotland itself. This is called scorched earth policy, guys, right? The Russians did the same to the Germans in World War II, right? So what happens next? Eventually he comes down south and he's confronted by these castles. Castles are a pain in the ass, guys. If you don't have siege warfare equipment such as trebuchets or catapults or siege engines, you are not getting inside castles, especially with a 300-man garrison like Edinburgh Castle had. So, what do? In a situation faced like that, where you're screwed either way, you subcontract. You get somebody else to deal with that crap for you, yeah? The man's name who got that crap job was Thomas Randolph, the Earl of Murray. He was the nephew of Robert the Bruce. He had 30 men. He was told, take Edinburgh Castle. 30 versus 300, 10 to 1. He took one look at this castle and said, screw this, we're going to the pub. They went to the pub. They got absolutely trashed. No, they didn't. They were asking the Scottish population for tunnels and secret entrances into Edinburgh Castle. There are none, because you try and cut through that black basalt rock, it's a former volcano, for Christ's sake. There are no secret tunnels into Edinburgh Castle that I know of anyway, right? So, what did they do? They found a drunken Englishman in one of the bars by the name of William Francis, a member of the garrison of Edinburgh Castle. An Englishman who was sick and tired of his job, absolutely broken, yeah, from a 10-year occupation where he was the aggressor. He was the man making others victims. So he broke. Yeah? He gave not only the positions of each and every member of the garrison where they defended Edinburgh Castle, but for a sum of coins, he also gave away the hidden northern pathway up Edinburgh Castle's black basalt rock. And in March 1314, the 30 men led by Thomas Randolph in the dead of night scaled Edinburgh Castle wall, and they got inside. Yeah? The men on duty, they slit their throats. Yeah, or they stabbed them in the back when they weren't looking. They knew exactly where they were. The remaining 250 soldiers got a pillow to the face and a knife to the heart. They stabbed them to death in their bunks. It was brutal. But they took Edinburgh Castle. But with a measly 30 men, like we are, do you think they could hold it? No. Yeah, there's no way you could hold a castle this large with just 30. So, the castle was made out of wood, with the exception of that stone building. What do you think happens next? Up in flames, yeah? Thomas Randolph was told by the Bruce, burn Edinburgh Castle. But whatever you do, leave that chapel standing. Because we need something to go to the Roman Catholic Church with and say, please, please, yeah, give us communion, bring us back into the organization. That building was used as an olive branch, and it worked. He was given confession, and the Bruce was back in the Roman Catholic Church. They would raise an army of 6,000 Scotsmen with the church and march them to the battlefield of Bannockburn. The English numbered 15,000. They outnumbered them 3 to 1. They fought in their little porcupines. Halfway through the battle, Robert the Bruce rode out, rallying his men to try and boost their morale. An English knight would spot them and go hell for leather to try and kill the Bruce on an enormous French horse, plate armor, giant shield, huge, so lance. Robert the Bruce was there, yeah, chainmail armor, smaller shield, and an axe. Yeah, he was riding the equivalent of what we would call a pony. right? I'm not even joking. The Scottish horses were a lot smaller. When he rode, they looked like stars and glitter come out, right? But he charged towards the man. He looked dwarfed by comparison, but he was small enough to avoid the joust and bring over his own axe and crack the man's head open. It was done in front of all of his old soldiers. You can imagine what they felt when they saw their king crack an English knight's head open in the midst of the battlefield. They roared, yeah? They picked up their lances and they drove forward. They turned the fate of the battle around, yeah? They took Bannockburn. The miracle should be called, not the battle. However, after that, every castle in Scotland is now isolated with its English garrison. Within 6 months, they start to surrender. They're done. So one by one they fall. By 1327, not only have the Scots made the Declaration of Arbroath, their Declaration of Independence, Robert the Bruce has made a treaty with nearly every king on the continent, including the Pope, but also Edward III, the King of England, finally signs the treaty. Good. However, Robert the Bruce is nearly at the end of his life, and he has one final request. Just one. When I die, take out my heart, put it in a silver box, and take it on crusade throughout Europe. He was losing his mind, clearly, right? They took out the heart, they put it in a silver box, and they sealed it, and they took it across Europe. 20 of his most loyal men. I just imagine 20 drunk Scotsmen on a bus, driving across here. Where are we going next, guys? Prague, this way, right? They got to Granada in southern Spain. There, the Alhambra, the mighty Islamic fortress, stood. The Arabic archers saw the Scotsmen, and they thought they were Spaniards. So they volleyed a volley of arrows and killed them. One of them barely survived. According to legend, he picked up the little silver box with the heart inside and threw it at the walls of the Alhambra. The Spaniard recovered the little heart and brought it back to Scotland, via a diplomat. The heart was buried in Melrose Abbey for years, centuries, and then dug up recently and buried next to Robert the Bruce in Dunfermline Abbey. Brave heart, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the term comes from the act of defiance of throwing the little heart at the walls of the Alhambra. Got nothing to do with William Wallace and sod all to do with Mel Gibson, ladies and gents, right? Either way, go inside the wee chapel over here, see where Scotland's fate was decided. Had they burnt that little chapel over there, Scottish history would be written very differently. On the left-hand side, you've got the whiskey rooms of Edinburgh Castle. Nothing historic about those, but they do free samples. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, ladies and gentlemen, right? To finish the tour now, guys, in the final section of Edinburgh Castle, the Crown Square, the Palace Yard. You will never have to look at my face after this stop, right? Come this way with me. Guys, this section of the castle is the most important, right? The palace is behind me. On the left lie the ruins of David's Tower, the massive 30-foot tower I talked about earlier on that the English destroyed. All the remains today are the catacombs below, located right next to the toilets. Both are clearly labeled, toilets and David's Tower. Gentlemen, if you don't see a urinal, you're in the wrong room, okay? Do not pee on the floor of David's Tower, right? Go in and have a little look. This building directly here, we've talked about already. The National War Memorial of Scotland, Please be respectful when you go inside. On the right, the Lion, England with a Union shield. On the left, the Unicorn of Scotland with St. Andrew's shield, The Unicorn has more of a mohawk, but if they give him a real horn, he would end up gouging somebody's eye out, I have no doubt in my mind, right? The building over there, the Queen Anne building, second tea rooms of Edinburgh Castle, with British right? The buildings themselves, built in 1710, always in some way, shape or form, kitchens, storerooms and supply rooms of the castle itself, That doesn't really shock me when you consider this building over here. This is the Great Hall, finished in the, guys, you might one table, come into this, okay? My voice is pretty much shot at this point after a month of August, Secondly, there's tour guides everywhere. We're like flies on poop this time of year, right? The Great Hall, one of the last remaining early modern structures inside Edinburgh Castle, Inside the structure, very little of it remains original. James IV, whose standard actually sits at the side of the wall, the two unicorns, and of course the red lion rampant below, has the symbol of the rose and the thistle. Why? Why the rose? He was in English. Nothing to do with England in his court. Well, not really. His wife was English, Margaret Tudor. It was that marriage that intertwined the Stuarts and the Tudors together and made England and Scotland one day unite as, a single realm in some respects. But James IV died in 1513. He enjoyed the building several times, great feasts inside, but he left a mark of his own that would not be rediscovered until the year 1984. You see, Oliver Cromwell and his troops gutted the building. He tore out the interior. Queen Victoria's most loyal architect, Hippolyte Bon, in the 19th century, restored it for her. But it was in 1984 that Mikhail Gorbachev, by the way, died yesterday, if you didn't already know. Yeah? Very important man. The leader of the USSR came to Edinburgh Castle, and with him came his personal KGB security. Yeah? And when they came to Edinburgh Castle, they insisted on going inside every bloody building, every bloody room, looking for cameras and microphones, thinking that we, the British, were spying on their great leader. The cheek of it, when we were. But we didn't realize it at the time, right? They found something astonishing inside the hall. Within 10 minutes, they had rediscovered the personal and private peephole of James IV, his spy on his own court to make sure they were never plotting against him. We call it the Lord's lug, the Lord's ear, because you can also hear from that section as well. Yeah, I love the delicious irony that they're looking for cameras and microphones, and they find the equivalent of what's basically in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. Yeah, with a painting looking back and forth across the court just here. Yeah. However, guys, on the right-hand side, just over here, 1566 MH. These are the personal rooms of Mary, Queen of Scots, yeah? H stands for Henry, Lord Darnley, her husband and her cousin at the same time. Rather disgusting, but it was very popular at the time, yeah? Why did Elizabeth kill Mary? They had a good relationship. It was because both women had a claim to the English throne because of that marriage over there. So when Elizabeth killed Mary, she never expected the irony of to be succeeded by Mary's son. You see, Mary's son was James VI. In 1603, he became King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. All he had to do his entire life was just wait for Elizabeth to die to claim the thrones for himself. Yeah, I bet you any money he was there in 1603 with a packet of cigarettes in one hand, a bottle of scotch in the other, looking at the phone going, "Come on, you bitch, it's time to die." My turn now. Yeah, this is what Charles is doing right now, just to let you know. Come on, my turn now. Yeah. Either way. Above the doorway here is ER, Elizabeth Regina, Her Majesty, Elizabeth II, current monarch of the United Kingdom. Sword, sceptre and crown of Scotland. These are the honours of Scotland, the royal crown jewels of the Scottish realm. We lost them for 111 years because Oliver Cromwell swore he would melt them down. So we hid them in a large trunk below the palace. In 1819, Sir Walter Scott went inside the palace, rediscovered them and put them back on public display. Since that year, 203 years ago, Edinburgh Castle has been a tourist destination. Congratulations, you are now part of that proud tradition. Yay! But what could be more important than the crown jewels is one item inside that you should all go and see. The Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scudin, the royal throne of Scottish kings. Every Scottish king since Kenneth MacAlpine and the ancient kings of Alba sat on that stone. When they sat there, the bishops would come over and say, "Congratulations, you're now King of Scots, you've got 3 months to live. Good luck, bye." That was the average life then for the Scottish king. One man saw the importance of this stone. His name, Edward I, King of England. He stole it, took it down to London, he built a chair around it. Today we call that chair the Royal Coronation Chair of the United Kingdom. Every royal monarch since 1707 has sat their sweet derriere upon that chair. They are King of England, but by virtue of the stone in between their legs, they are also King of Scots. It is a very clever piece of propaganda made by Edward. Yeah? However, the Scots wanted that stone back. In 1327, they demanded it be returned to Scotland. Yeah? Now, Edward III did promise he would return the stone, but did say in the Treaty of Northampton there would be a meagre delay to return it. Meagre delay my ass. It came back here in 1996, 6.5 centuries later, right? Either way, how did we get it back? We got it back in the end because 4 students from the University of Glasgow stole it. They broke into Westminster Palace and they took the damn thing from the actual throne room. Now, quickly realizing that a stone of that size is rather heavy, halfway through to the car in the car park, they dropped it and they broke it into 2 separate pieces, right? easier now to get into the boot of the car, ironically. They threw it into the trunk, they drove it from London to Glasgow. That's 500 kilometers more or less, guys, yeah? They got to Glasgow and they hid it inside the student dormitory next to the fridge, yeah? They invited a local Scottish stonemason called Robert Gray to come in and fix it for them, yeah? He did it without charging a penny, and furthermore, he kept his mouth shut. He never said a word. He would go on to actually found the SNP, one of the founding members of the Scottish nationalist movement, yeah? So, what happened to the stone? They kept it in their flat for 3 months, literally watching television reports of the stolen Stone of Destiny while sitting on the Stone of Destiny, right? But eventually they have to move out, so they give it up. They leave it outside Arbroath Abbey, wrapped in a satire flame. The police discover it the same day that they abandon it, and they drive it back to where they think it belongs. London. They take it back to sod in London after 3 months, right? So how do we get it back here to this building here today? In 1996, one man returned. His name, John Major, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You might remember John. He used to tuck his shirt into his underwear all the time, right? Britain's dullest man, we call him. However, John, guys, needed to win an election the following year. The stone was political clickbait. Yeah, I returned the stone and yeah, you get the idea. One condition, this was the condition. If there is a new monarch of the United Kingdom, the stone must be returned to London, placed inside the seat so the ceremony can take place. As we know, Elizabeth is currently on her platinum jubilee. She's going nowhere, guys. Yeah, Charles is never getting that throne. Yeah, be there then. Come on, mother, please. It's my turn. Please, please. Get out, you useless little man. Talk to your vegetables. Get your sausage fingers off my throne. Right? The stone was returned in great pomposity and style, St. Andrew's Day, 1996. Do you think the Scottish people re-elected John Major the following year? No, of course they didn't, yeah? They elected a cool hip throb, Tony Blair, from Edinburgh locally, right? Your face, yeah, oh, yeah, I know. We thought he was great at the time, yeah? Not a war criminal at all. But, guys, Tony Blair changed the game of Scottish politics, yeah? Not only did he create, yeah, a system called devolution, this allowed Scotland to have its own parliament and its own government. They would decide the course of their history furthermore. But in 2014, they took this to the utmost. They launched a referendum for independence. Yeah? The Scottish population would vote in numbers unseen before in the history of this realm. They came out, they banded together, and all they had to do was mark an X in the box and they would have their freedom. They marked an X in the box, but the other box. Yeah? They voted 55 to 45 to remain a part of the United Kingdom. They rejected independence. Yeah? And then 2 years later, that bit them in the ass quite severely. When the European Union referendum came around, England and Wales voted and said goodbye, leaving Europe now, and Scotland was like, what? What do you think? No, they were holding on to Calais. The English dragged them out of the room. Come on, Scotland, it's time to go home. You've drunk enough. No, just a little bit more Malbec, right? So, what happens next? I don't know, guys. Yeah? For the first time in my life, I'm speechless. Yeah, and believe me, it takes a lot, right? What happens next? And maybe another referendum. Legal, illegal, unofficial, consultative, anything can happen. And the next 10 years, the history of this country can be written by any of the actors on this island and beyond, yeah? But you're gonna have to come back 10 years time to see what happens. You're gonna have to do this tour again in 10 years time with me, long grey hair and a big grey beard covered in tartan with an old man's walking stick going, I told you it would be this way, I told you it would be this way, yeah? And then you can go online to TripAdvisor or Google Reviews, write a terrible review and tell Richard was awful. For 2 hours he bored us lifeless and abandoned us by the toilets of Edinburgh Castle, right? Richard or Dick, not a Dick, do not write that on the tour. I didn't bite you, nobody died. Yeah? Please leave a 5-star review. 4 stars doesn't help, right? That's just like saying, it was great, and I kicked him a little bit at the end, right? Either way, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this tour today, if you have any questions, if you would like any recommendations, feel free to come and ask. But more important, yeah? if you wanted to stick around and you wanted to go further afield in Scotland, I am more than happy to provide that information for you. Yeah? Any tips or gratuity that come my way are gratefully accepted, and it doesn't matter if it's sterling, euros, or dollars. Why? Britain ain't picky right now, and neither am I. Guys, have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy your time in Edinburgh Castle. Thank you, one. Thank you all. Right?